I never used to be the kind of person who got spooked easily. I grew up in a noisy, crowded suburb just outside Atlanta. Honking cars, nosy neighbors, barking dogs. There was always someone around. Privacy didn't really exist, and for the most part, I didn't mind. But after I moved to Nashville for grad school, life slowed down. I found myself craving quiet weekends, something more grounded, peaceful. That's what led to the trip. It was late July, the kind of sweltering southern weekend where the air feels like soup, and your shirt sticks to your back before you make it to the car. My friend Amelia had just turned 26, and we figured it was the perfect excuse to get out of the city. Just us 5 girls, me, Amelia, Lauren, Jess, and Kat. We all met in college, scattered afterward but stayed close. Kat suggested we rent an Airbnb somewhere quiet, something in the mountains. She found this place outside a small town called Ellings Creek in northern Georgia. The listing said, "Cozy cabin with scenic views, perfect for group getaways." There were a few pictures of a 2-story wooden cabin, a long wraparound porch, and pine trees so tall they swallowed the sky. It had dozens of 5-star reviews, minus a few strange ones that mentioned the host checking in a lot. We laughed it off. Southern hospitality, right? We booked it for Friday through Sunday. The drive from Nashville took a little over 4 hours. Amelia's Jeep was packed with coolers, snacks, blankets, and enough wine to get a small village tipsy. By the time we reached the gravel road leading to the cabin, it was nearing dusk. Lauren squinted at the GPS. Says another half mile. But this doesn't look right. I think it's one of those roads that looks like it leads nowhere but doesn't, Kat said from the back seat. The road narrowed and curved through trees so dense they cast long finger-like shadows across the gravel. My stomach tensed a little, but I didn't say anything. Finally, the trees opened up and the cabin came into view. It looked just like the photos, maybe even nicer. A wide front porch, a porch swing, and that kind of warm wood glow that made it feel rustic but comfortable. A man stepped out from a smaller building tucked about 50 feet behind the main house. He waved as we pulled up. "That must be the host," Jess murmured. He looked to be in his early 50s, tall with a neatly trimmed beard and salt and pepper hair. He wore a flannel shirt and jeans, and when he smiled, his eyes crinkled. "Evening, ladies," he called. "Welcome to the Blue Pine Cabin. I'm Franklin. I manage the property. You girls find it okay?" We all got out, stretching our legs. Amelia shook his hand. "Yeah, no trouble at all. Thanks again for letting us stay." "Oh, it's no trouble," Franklin said. "I live in the guest cabin behind you. Won't be in your way at all. But if you need anything, firewood, more towels, recommendations, don't hesitate to holler." He looked at each of us, eyes lingering just a second longer than necessary. I didn't like that. The inside of the cabin was gorgeous. Exposed beams, a big stone fireplace, a kitchen with copper fixtures, and upstairs, 3 cozy bedrooms. There were little things that made it feel like a home. Soft throw blankets on the couches, lemon-scented candles, even a record player with a stack of old vinyls. We drank wine, cooked pasta, and played card games at the dining table. It felt like the kind of night that makes you forget about everything else. Work, rent, deadlines. Around midnight, we all crashed. I took the room closest to the stairs. Before I turned in, I stepped out onto the porch to get some air. That's when I saw Franklin. He was walking from his cabin toward the woods with a flashlight, moving slow, scanning the trees. I ducked back behind the doorway and watched. Maybe he was just checking on something. Maybe nothing. We spent the morning making breakfast and hiking a short trail nearby. Franklin wasn't around. We assumed he was off running errands or working on something in his cabin. It wasn't until that evening, after dinner, just as we were halfway through a drinking game, that someone knocked on the front door. Jess jumped. "Who the hell?" I looked through the peephole. Franklin stood there holding a small basket. Hey," I said, opening the door halfway. He smiled. "Just wanted to check in. Thought you girls might like some snacks. Local jerky, trail mix, homemade cookies." "Oh," I said. "Thanks, but we're good." "You sure?" His smile didn't waver. "We just ate, but it's really nice of you." I tried to keep it polite. He nodded, held the basket up as if to offer it again, then slowly walked back toward his cabin. I shut the door and locked it. "That was weird, right?" I asked the room. "Extremely," Lauren muttered. "Why would he bring snacks at 10 p.m.? We tried to move on, pretending it hadn't been strange. Kat put on music and we danced around like idiots. It helped for a little while. Then Jess froze mid-laugh. "Wait, did someone just walk by the porch window?" All of us went still. "What?" Amelia whispered. "I swear I saw a shadow." I grabbed a flashlight and opened the front door. The porch was empty. No sounds, just the cicadas buzzing in the trees. "Nothing," I said, but my heart thudded. Less than an hour later, we heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving across the porch boards. We killed the lights. From the darkness, I saw a figure standing just beyond the window, partially obscured by a wooden beam. It was Franklin, watching. I whispered, "He's out there again." This time, he didn't bring snacks. He knocked once, then again, harder. I opened the door an inch. "What's going on?" "I heard something," he said. "Sounded like screaming." "We didn't scream." "You sure?" His tone was off now. Flat. "We're fine," I said, forcing the door closed. I clicked the lock. "Good night, Franklin." He didn't walk away right away. I watched his shadow linger through the curtain crack. We didn't sleep well. Every creak, every gust of wind had us on edge. I woke early and went to the living room. Sunlight slanted through the windows. I sat on the couch rubbing my eyes, and that's when I noticed it. A soft gleam of metal from the bookshelf. I leaned closer. A tiny black lens. A camera. I called the others in. We tore the cabin apart. Found another in the bedroom disguised as a decorative hook. One in the kitchen clock. One, God help us, in the bathroom vent. We all stood there shaking. "He's been watching us," Kat whispered. "Since we got here," Jess added. We packed in silence, panic bubbling under the surface. We left everything clean but didn't care about checkout rules. We didn't confront him. We didn't want to. Keys on the counter, bags in the Jeep, engine running. As we backed out, I saw him on his porch watching us. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just stared. As soon as we had cell service, I reported everything to Airbnb, screenshots, pictures of the cameras, the exact timestamps. I left a detailed review under a throwaway account. We never heard back from them, but a few weeks later, the listing was gone. Sometimes I wonder how many others he watched, or if he ever left those cameras running, even when no one was renting. I always liked living on the edge of small towns, the kind where you're still technically part of the community, but far enough out that you can forget about nosy neighbors or constant traffic. That's what drew my husband, Noah, and me to Maple Hollow, North Carolina. After years in noisy apartment buildings, we wanted space, privacy, something quiet. We found this charming little house on the edge of a wooded patch, one of those half-acre properties with a wraparound porch and a garden bed already in place. It was perfect. We bought it 3 summers ago, and it honestly felt like a fresh chapter. But no one mentioned the Airbnb next door. The house sat empty for months after we moved in. Then, almost a year ago, a man from out of state bought it and converted it into a short-term rental. At first, we didn't mind. The guests were mostly families or traveling couples, quiet and respectful. Some waved, some didn't. A few even brought us leftover baked goods or said hi over the fence. Then came that one weekend in late September. It had been a warm day, one of those rare golden hours just before fall kicks in for real. Noah and I had just finished dinner and settled in the living room, a documentary queued up on the TV. I remember the windows were open because the house smelled like cinnamon from the candle burning on the coffee table, and outside, the air had a sweet, earthy smell. Around 8:45 p.m., I glanced out the living room window and paused. In the backyard of the Airbnb, 2 people, young, maybe mid-20s, were setting something up on the grass. At first I thought they were just unpacking a picnic or lighting citronella candles, but then I saw what they were really doing. There were candles, yes, but they were arranged in a strange geometric pattern on the grass, like a circle or a star. I couldn't quite tell from our angle. The woman, tall and dark-haired, was laying down what looked like feathers or small bones. The man, shaggy blonde hair, jeans and no shirt, was drawing something on the grass with what looked like chalk or maybe flour. "Babe," I said, nudging Noah's arm. "Look at this." He leaned over and squinted. "What the hell are they doing? Some kind of ritual?" "I guess," I muttered. "Weird hobby, but whatever, right?" Noah chuckled nervously. "Long as they don't set anything on fire." We watched for a few more minutes, partly because it was fascinating, partly because it made the hair on my arms stand up. Eventually, they just sat cross-legged within their candle circle, facing each other. It was unsettling, but not exactly threatening, so we let it go. We turned the TV up and lost ourselves in the show. By the time we went to bed around 11:30, I glanced out the bedroom window one more time. The Airbnb's backyard was dimly lit now, just faint candlelight still flickering. The couple was still there, just sitting. "Still at it?" Noah asked sleepily. "Yep. I guess we've got some spiritualists next door." "Better that than drunks," he said, rolling over. I agreed and climbed into bed. I woke to murmuring, low, repetitive, rhythmic. It wasn't a dream. I was still half asleep but aware. The kind of waking where your heart is already beating too fast, like your brain is trying to warn you before you understand why. I sat up. The murmurs were coming from outside, through the open bedroom window. "Noah," I whispered, shaking him. "Listen." He groaned but sat up, rubbing his eyes. Then we both froze. Someone was whispering, no, chanting, outside. Not in the Airbnb's yard, closer. Our yard. I moved to the window. The moon was high, casting long shadows across our lawn. That's when I saw them. The same couple from next door, standing in our backyard, inside another ring of flickering candles. This one wasn't a circle, though. It was a triangle, with some kind of symbol etched into the grass in the middle. They were moving slowly in sync like a dance, their hands rising and falling with their words. "Noah," I breathed. "They're in our yard." He was already out of bed, grabbing his phone. I don't know why, but we didn't go out there. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was instinct. Something told us not to interfere. Instead, we crept to the back door and made sure it was locked, then checked the others. Every door, every window, double-checked and bolted. From the kitchen window we could still see them, lit only by the orange candle glow. Their faces were blank, focused, not angry, just distant, unreachable. And then I noticed something even stranger. Further back in the woods beyond our property, there were more lights. Tiny pinpricks of firelight, like torches, or more candles set deep in the trees. "They went into the woods," Noah whispered. My hands were clammy. "Why are they doing this here?" He didn't answer. We stayed up until the chanting stopped, until the lights vanished, until the backyard was dark and empty again. The next morning, their car was gone. The Airbnb driveway was empty and the backyard over there was spotless, like nothing had happened. We stepped out cautiously into our yard. Everything looked fine, no damage, no evidence, except for one thing, a note weighed down by a small stone in the middle of the lawn. I stared at it for a long time before finally kneeling down. My fingers shook as I unfolded the paper. It read, "Thank you for your participation. You have been seen. You have been blessed." That was it. No name. No explanation. We didn't tell anyone at first. Who would believe us? There was no proof. No cameras, no photos. Just two freaky guests and a bizarre ritual that bled across property lines. But it didn't end there. Over the next few nights, we started hearing things. Soft knocks on the back fence at exactly 3 a.m., strange humming through the open vents, scratches inside the walls. At first, we thought it was our imagination. We kept telling ourselves that, over and over. But then we found something else. One morning, about a week later, I stepped outside to grab the mail and froze. There, on our doormat, was another note. This one was typed, "We appreciate your silence." That was it. Noah wanted to call the police, but what would we report? Trespassing with candles? Strange notes? We did reach out to the Airbnb owner, though. Sent a polite message saying that the last guests had entered our yard during the night and made us uncomfortable. He replied within hours, "I'm really sorry. I have no record of a reservation from the 23rd to the 25th. Are you sure they were staying at my place?" That's when the bottom dropped out of my stomach. We were sure. We saw them park there. We watched them set up. They went in and out of the Airbnb house. But apparently, no one had booked it that weekend. We stopped sleeping with the windows open after that. We bought motion lights and cameras. But whatever they did out there, whatever they invited, I still feel it sometimes. A heaviness in the air when the sun goes down. A shift in the stillness. Like something watching. Sometimes I wake up at 3 a.m. on the dot. No sound. No movement. Just that feeling. Like the ritual never really ended. Like we're still inside the circle. And we were never supposed to see it. I had never used Airbnb before. Hotels were always the safer, simpler choice. You knew what to expect. Front desk, cleaning staff, cameras in the hallways, locked lobby doors at night. But this time, we were going for something a little more authentic. It was the beginning of April, just starting to warm up after a bitter Michigan winter. My friends and I, Rachel, Elise, Marcus, and DeAndre, were heading up to Traverse Bay for a long weekend. Nothing too fancy. Just a breather from work, stress, and everything else. We'd originally planned to book a lakefront cabin through a local rental site, but last-minute cancellations and high prices narrowed our options. That's when Marcus found the Airbnb. It was a 2-story home just outside of town, tucked into a woodsy stretch with no immediate neighbors. It had 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, a cozy kitchen, and a finished basement with a rec room. The photos looked clean, the price was cheap, and most importantly, no shared space with the host, or so we thought. We arrived on a Thursday afternoon. The sky was gray, but the air had that early spring smell, wet bark and thawing soil. The house was nice, not just Airbnb nice, but genuinely cozy. There was a stone fireplace in the living room, a small patio out back, and lots of homey touches, quilted pillows, a bowl of wrapped candy on the counter, even a coat rack by the door. The key was in a lockbox, just like the host, Greg, said in the message. We'd never spoken to him directly, only exchanged a few texts. The tone was polite, maybe a bit clipped. "Full access to the house," he wrote. "No need to interact, just enjoy the space." That was fine with us. We were looking forward to turning off our brains for a few days. It wasn't until later that evening that things started to feel off. Elise was the first one to mention it. "Is it weird that there's like stuff still here?" she said, pulling a drawer in the kitchen open. Inside were checkbooks, some bills, a small Ziploc with change. Like personal stuff. I shrugged. "Maybe he lives here when it's not rented?" Rachel chimed in from the living room. "There's a PlayStation 5 hooked up to the TV in here. I thought people took their electronics with them." We started noticing more details. Shoes in the hall closet, a car key on the counter, bottled medications in the bathroom drawer labeled with the name Greg Holloway. "You don't think he's, still living here, right?" Marcus joked, but his laugh was thin. "It says we have the whole place," DeAndre said. "Maybe he just doesn't care. Trusts people." That didn't explain why the basement door had a padlock on it. We didn't think about it too much that night. We made pasta, played cards, watched a dumb horror movie, and picked rooms. I took the one at the top of the stairs with a window overlooking the driveway. I had trouble sleeping. It wasn't just unfamiliarity. It was the creaking. Old houses always make noise, sure, but this one settled like it was exhaling. Floorboards popped, pipes knocked. At one point I swore I heard the front door rattle, but when I peeked, it was locked. I finally drifted off sometime after 2. At 3:47 a.m., I woke up needing to pee. I lay there for a minute staring at the dark ceiling, hoping the feeling would pass. But my bladder wouldn't let me off the hook. I swung my legs over the bed and shuffled toward the hallway. That's when I heard it. Soft steps on carpet. A rustle. I paused, hand on my doorknob. Maybe one of the others was up. Rachel had a small bladder. Elise got insomnia sometimes. I opened the door quietly. The hallway was dim, lit only by the faint blue light from the nightlight near the stairs. And at the far end of the hall, near Elise's door, was a figure. Male, stocky, wearing what looked like a hoodie. I froze. He didn't see me at first. He was crouched slightly, hand on Elise's doorknob as if testing it. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe right. It was like my body locked up. Then his head turned, and we locked eyes. He looked surprised, not scared, not angry, just caught. I reacted without thinking. I slapped the light switch beside me. The hallway lights blinked on in a cold, sudden glow. "Hey!" I screamed. "What the fu—" Doors slammed open behind me. Rachel, Marcus, DeAndre, all yelling over each other. Elise's door swung open too, and she screamed when she saw the man standing feet from her. "Wait, wait!" the man shouted, backing away. "I'm Greg. I'm the host." "The fuck are you doing in the house?" Marcus shouted, lunging forward. Greg threw up his hands. I left some tools downstairs. I needed them for work tomorrow. I thought I could just grab them." "At 4 in the morning?" DeAndre barked. Greg looked panicked now, sweating. He had no shoes on. We herded him downstairs, still yelling over one another. That's when Rachel noticed the padlock on the basement door was open. "You were down there?" she asked. I just sleep there when I'm not renting the upstairs. "It's my house," he said quickly, voice shaking. "I wasn't going to bother anyone. I thought you'd be asleep." I remember feeling this deep, cold unease in my chest, like my ribs were hollow. He had been in the house the whole time. We made him sit on the couch while Marcus called Airbnb support, and Rachel dialed the local non-emergency police line. Greg didn't try to run. Eventually, an officer came out. We told him everything. The cop listened, took statements, and pulled Greg aside for a quiet conversation in the kitchen. Legally, it was complicated. Greg did own the house, but his listing clearly stated the guests would have exclusive access during stays. Nowhere did it say he'd be living in the basement. The officer strongly encouraged Greg to leave for the rest of our stay. He did, taking only a duffel bag. We didn't sleep much after that. The next day, we packed up early and left. Elise cried in the car. I filed a report with Airbnb, so did the others. His listing was taken down a few days later. I don't know if he faced any real legal consequences, but he was banned from the platform. We later joked about it, Basement Goblin Greg, or Airbnb with benefits. But none of us really laughed. Not in a real way. I haven't used Airbnb since, because no matter how clean the place looks, how cheap the price is, or how friendly the host sounds over text, you never know who's already inside. I needed to get out of the city for a while. It had been a stressful few months at work, deadlines piling up, constant calls, never-ending noise. And honestly, I was burning out. My partner, Erin, could tell. She found this little cabin listed on Airbnb, tucked into the hills near Huron Ridge, a tiny town about 4 hours from where we lived in St. Louis. It looked perfect. No neighbors too close, no city lights. Just tall trees, winding dirt roads, and stars. Endless stars. The listing had a rustic charm. A small fire pit out back, a wooden deck, and a yard that backed up to a slope thick with pines. The host, Julia, had great reviews. The kind where people said things like, "exactly what we needed," and "felt like home." Aaron booked it for the weekend without even running it past me. Just sent me the confirmation like a rescue rope. We packed light, a few changes of clothes, snacks, a couple bottles of wine, and Aaron's telescope. She was always into stargazing. I liked watching her more than the sky, if I'm being honest. We arrived late Friday afternoon. The air smelled like damp leaves and earth. The driveway crunched under our tires as we pulled up the gravel path to the house. A key was waiting for us in a lockbox, just like the listing said. No check-in, no meet and greet. I liked that. The place was nicer than I expected. Clean, cozy, minimal. A big window in the living room faced the yard and the slope of the forest beyond. We unpacked quickly, lit a couple candles, and opened the wine. "This is exactly what you needed," Erin said, brushing her hand along my back. I nodded. "Yeah, it's quiet. Like, actually quiet." Around 9 p.m., we took the wine and a couple of blankets and headed out to the back deck. The sky was clear, darker than anything you'd see back home. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a smear of powdered sugar. We talked for hours. About work, about maybe moving somewhere less noisy, about nothing. I hadn't felt that grounded in months. At some point, I noticed a flicker of light through the trees to our right. A neighboring house, maybe 50 or 60 feet away, slightly downhill. We hadn't seen it when we arrived. There were no fences, just thick brush between the yards. "Look," I whispered, nudging Aaron. A porch light blinked on at the house next door. A man stepped out, just a silhouette at first. He walked to the edge of his yard and stood still. I thought maybe he was letting a dog out or something. But there was no leash, no barking, nothing. Just him, standing there, his phone in his hand. Then I saw it. His phone screen lit up and he lifted it, not to his face but pointed toward us. "Is he recording?" Erin asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't be sure, but the angle was right. His phone was steady, held high like someone filming, and he wasn't moving. I shifted the blanket off my lap and stood slowly, keeping my eyes on him. "Let's head inside," I said, trying to stay calm. Aaron didn't argue. We grabbed our things, walked in through the sliding glass door and shut it behind us. From the living room, I looked out again. He was still there, still filming or watching, hard to tell. No flashlight, just the glow of his screen. Aaron tried to brush it off. Maybe he's just checking his reception or something. I shook my head. Then why stand that still, facing us? She didn't have an answer. We shut the curtains and tried to ignore it. Made some popcorn. Watched half a movie before heading to bed around midnight. I woke up to a sound I couldn't place. Not loud, just soft rustling, like leaves underfoot. Erin was asleep beside me, her face half buried in the pillow. I slipped out of bed quietly and padded to the window. The curtain was thin, and the moonlight outside made everything glow slightly blue. There he was. Closer this time. In our yard. I blinked twice, trying to process. He stood by the tree line just beyond the reach of the yard light we hadn't turned on. His hands were at his sides, not holding a phone now. Just watching. I didn't want to wake Aaron yet. Maybe I was imagining it. I moved to the living room and turned on the lamp near the couch, something small but noticeable. When I returned to the window, he was gone. Gone. I leaned closer to the glass, heart pounding. Then I saw movement, his door closing next door, like he had slipped back to his house as soon as the lights came on. I stayed up for another hour, sitting on the couch with the lamp still on, watching. But nothing else happened. The next morning, we debated what to do. "Let's just go about our day," Aaron said. "We're leaving tomorrow anyway." We went hiking around some nearby trails, got lunch in town, stopped by a little antique shop. For a while, I forgot about the night before. When we returned to the cabin, the sun was already going down. The sky was overcast this time, no stars to see. I didn't even suggest going outside, neither did Aaron. We watched a movie, ate leftovers, and curled up together in bed by 10:30. Then the footsteps came. Soft, deliberate. Not like someone jogging by or walking their dog, like someone sneaking. I sat up instantly. Erin stirred. "What is it?" she mumbled. I held a finger to my lips and tiptoed to the window. This time he was right up against the side of the cabin, his shadow stretched across the deck, visible under the sliver of porch light we had left on. He walked toward the side window, the living room one we hadn't drawn the curtain on fully. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. As I whispered to the dispatcher, I watched him cup his hands against the glass and lean forward, peering in. "He's looking inside," I said. "I don't know him. He's a neighbor here, but he's been doing this 2 nights in a row." The dispatcher told me officers were en route, but the area was rural and it might take time. Just then, he turned his head toward the glow of our bedroom window. I ducked quickly, heart thudding so hard I felt dizzy. A few minutes later, I peeked again. He was gone. By the time the sheriff's deputy arrived, about 20 minutes later, he was back in his own house. We explained everything, showed them the direction he'd come from, even mentioned the phone he'd pointed toward us the night before. The deputy knocked on the neighbor's door, but no one answered. "We'll make a note of it," he said. "Let the property owner know, and keep your phones close tonight, just in case." Not exactly comforting. We barely slept. The next morning, Erin called the Airbnb host, Julia, and told her everything. She seemed shocked, apologetic. "I've never had a complaint like this before," she said. "I'm so sorry. That's disturbing. I'll reach out to the neighbor myself." We packed fast and hit the road early. I don't know if that man ever bothered another guest. I left a detailed private message to Julia through Airbnb and a review that only mentioned security concerns without specifics. Enough to warn, not enough to get flagged. I still think about it sometimes. How he didn't flinch when we saw him. How he moved closer the second night. How he never said a word, never smiled or made any gesture. Just watched. It made me realize how vulnerable we are even in the quietest places. Especially in the quietest places. And how a weekend meant to escape the noise became a nightmare of silence. I didn't think anything of the place at first. We'd been needing a break for months. Work had drained both me and my wife, and the kids had been restless, always indoors ever since school let out. So, when my cousin Marlon told me about a quiet little Airbnb he'd stayed in with his wife in a small town upstate, we jumped on it. The house was in a town called Whisper Pines, about a 3-hour drive from where we lived in Durham. It wasn't remote, just tucked away enough that you felt like you'd escaped city noise. The Airbnb listing said, "Family-friendly retreat with large backyard and treehouse." The pictures showed a quaint little home with a wraparound porch, pine trees all around, and that treehouse caught the kids' attention right away. My wife Rachel was skeptical at first. She doesn't love staying in homes owned by strangers. But the reviews were mostly glowing, and it was only for a weekend. Our kids, Eli, 7, and Sophie, 6, were bouncing with excitement just looking at the photos. We packed up Friday morning and arrived late afternoon. It was a bit overcast when we got there, a breeze shaking through the pine needles. The owner had left a handwritten note on the kitchen counter. "Welcome, Evans family. Mi casa es su casa. Help yourself to board games in the closet, enjoy the swing set, and don't forget to leave a review." The key had been in a lockbox, just like promised. We walked through the house together, letting the kids explore. The interior had that lived-in feeling, not fancy, but warm. Creaky floorboards, wood-paneled walls, a slightly outdated couch that swallowed you when you sat. It smelled like lemon cleaner and something faint underneath, maybe mothballs. After unpacking, we watched a movie together and made popcorn. Rachel and I opened a bottle of wine and sat up talking after the kids went to bed. It wasn't until close to midnight that we called it a night. That first day felt normal, good even. But something woke me around 1:30 a.m. It wasn't a bang or crash, just whispering, soft and drawn out, like two people murmuring behind a wall. I sat up in bed, confused. Rachel was asleep, one arm over her face. I strained to listen. The sound faded out like it had never been there. Probably wind, I muttered to myself. The windows were shut, the house sealed. Still, I told myself it was nothing and lay back down. I didn't sleep well the rest of the night. The next morning, the kids were up before us, already outside. I found them by the treehouse. "Dad, it has a rope ladder," Eli shouted. "It's so cool." Sophie was swinging gently nearby, her stuffed llama in her lap. I noticed the wood looked grayed out, like it hadn't been stained or repaired in years. The swing chains creaked with every motion. The treehouse had peeling paint, one shutter hanging crooked. A little unsafe, but nothing immediate. I told them to be careful and watch them for a while before heading in to help Rachel make breakfast. She looked tired. "Did you sleep okay?" I asked. She hesitated before answering. "Yeah, I just had a weird dream, I think." "About what?" "I don't know. I thought I heard someone calling my name, but I must have been half asleep." I almost told her about the whispering but decided against it. Didn't want to start the trip off on a spooky note. That afternoon we explored town. Whisper Pines was small, 2 diners, a gas station, and a strip of local shops. It had that sleepy southern vibe. People waved from their porches. At a small coffee shop, we got hot chocolate for the kids and iced coffee for us. One of the baristas, a woman maybe in her 50s, overheard Rachel mention the Airbnb. "Y'all staying at the Pine Grove house?" she asked. Yeah, that's the one," Rachel said. The woman's smile faltered. "That place still listed?" We exchanged glances. "I stayed there once," the woman continued. "Years ago. It was different then. Kept hearing things at night. Thought I was losing my mind." She chuckled awkwardly. "Anyway, you folks enjoy your weekend. It's probably nothing." The kids were pulling on our arms to leave. I made a mental note of the conversation but still tried not to think too much of it. Local gossip, probably. That night after dinner, we pulled out an old board game from the hall closet and set up in the living room. Rachel had lit a couple of candles because the overhead lights kept flickering. "It's like we're playing by candlelight," she joked. Sophie squealed with laughter as she beat us all at the game. Everything felt light again. But then I noticed something. The front door. It was cracked open. "Did someone open the door?" I asked. Rachel frowned. "No, I locked it earlier. I double-checked." I went over and shut it. This time, I made sure it latched and turned the deadbolt. Still, my skin prickled. Maybe one of the kids had fiddled with it. Maybe not. About 20 minutes later, the lights flickered again, this time more violently. Then the power went out entirely. "Okay, that's not funny," Rachel said, standing up. "I didn't do anything," I said, grabbing my phone for a flashlight. I went to the kitchen to check the fuse box, but everything seemed normal. Within a minute or two, the power came back on. The kids were huddled near Rachel, wide-eyed. "I want to go home," Sophie whispered. "You're okay, sweetheart, just an old house," Rachel told her, though her voice wasn't totally steady. Around 9 p.m., Eli came running inside, sobbing. His face was white. "What happened?" I asked, kneeling. "I saw someone," he cried. "In the treehouse. He was sitting in there just looking at me." Rachel pulled him into a hug, whispering reassurance. I ran outside, heart pounding. The swing set was empty, still swaying. The treehouse looked the same, dark inside, silent. I climbed up the ladder with a flashlight. Nothing. Cobwebs in the corners, an old beanbag in one corner. No signs of anyone. "He's just imagining things," I told Rachel once we were inside. "Maybe shadows. It's probably..." But even as I said it, my voice trailed off. That night, after we put the kids to bed, Rachel looked at me across the candlelit table. "I don't like it here." I nodded slowly. I don't either. Around 2 a.m., I woke again. This time it wasn't whispering, it was footsteps. Clear, slow steps in the hallway outside our bedroom. I held my breath. They stopped right at the bedroom door. I sat up, barely breathing. The door didn't open. I got up quietly and opened it. Hallway empty. The whole house still. But when I walked toward the living room, I saw it. The front door. Wide open again. I stood frozen, the night air curling into the house. I checked the porch, the yard. Nothing. I locked the door again, this time jamming a chair against it. I didn't sleep again. The next morning I told Rachel everything. She just stared at me, pale. I saw someone too, she whispered. In the hallway. Last night. Just a figure. But it was watching me. She paused. And I never opened the front door. We didn't talk about it in front of the kids. We told them we were heading home early because of a change of plans. They didn't question it. When we loaded the car, Sophie looked back at the swing set and said, "She's still sitting there." I turned slowly. The swing swayed once, gently, but no one was there. We drove back home that afternoon. The closer we got to Durham, the lighter I felt, as if a weight was lifting from my chest. I don't know what's wrong with that house in Whisper Pines. I don't think it's just local gossip anymore. Maybe something happened there years ago. Maybe the house just remembers. I haven't left a review, and I don't think I ever will. In hindsight, I should have just kept driving. I was on a solo road trip through northern Arizona, working my way up from Tucson to Sedona for a week-long getaway I'd planned months in advance. I'd recently quit my job at a dental office after a particularly awful burnout and a breakup that followed not long after. Honestly, I just needed space. The plan was to stop halfway for one night, rest, and then continue on to my main Airbnb the next afternoon. That's how I ended up booking a small 2-bedroom rental in a neighborhood outside Prescott. The listing showed a clean, modest house with good lighting, security cameras outside, and keypad entry. It had decent reviews too. Nothing glowing, but nothing alarming either. And the host, someone named Rick, responded quickly to my messages, which put me at ease. I pulled up around 7:45 p.m. It was early spring, but the air had a slight chill to it, and a few stars had already begun to peek through the sky. The street was quiet, save for a barking dog down the road and the distant hum of a TV through someone's open window. The place looked just like the photos. Tan stucco walls, a red tile roof, a short walkway flanked by gravel landscaping. I unlocked the front door with the code Rick had texted me and stepped into a spotless living room. It smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something warm, maybe like a cinnamon plug-in. I dropped my bag by the door and walked through the house out of habit, checking each room. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small kitchen, and a cozy couch facing a wall-mounted TV. Nothing fancy, but clean, well kept. I FaceTimed my sister real quick to let her know I'd made it. "Girl, that looks like something out of HGTV, she said, smiling. "You gonna watch trash TV and eat ice cream?" "You know me too well," I laughed. We hung up after a few minutes and I ordered a pizza from a nearby place. It arrived by 8:30. I ate half of it on the couch while watching 90 Day Fiancé, then put the leftovers in the fridge. By 9:15, I was already getting sleepy. The plan was to crash early and leave by mid-morning. That's when the doorbell rang. It wasn't a ding-dong chime. It was one of those harsh mechanical buzzes, loud enough to make me flinch. I sat up slowly, confused. I wasn't expecting anyone. My Airbnb check-in didn't mention anything about housekeepers or the owner stopping by. Still, I figured it might be a mistake. A delivery person, maybe. I walked to the door but didn't open it. "Hello?" I called through the wood. There was a pause, then a man's voice, low and firm. "Yeah, hi. We're here for the Airbnb. Can you open up?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" I asked, still behind the door. "I'm staying here tonight." Another voice chimed in, softer, almost laughing. "Nah, we've got the reservation. You must be mixed up." Something felt off. My heart thudded. "No, I have the listing in my app," I said. "You need to call the host." "Come on, just open the door, we'll sort it out inside." That triggered something in me, some primal alarm. I was 5 feet 3 inches, alone, and definitely not opening that door. "No," I snapped. "I'm calling the owner. Please step away." There was silence again. Then I heard footsteps, one pair walking off the porch. But the other? The second man stayed. I looked through the peephole, but it only showed part of the porch. I could see one guy standing off to the left, facing away toward the driveway. He was looking at a car parked there, a dark SUV with its engine running. Something in my gut told me this wasn't about a reservation. This wasn't a misunderstanding. That's when I noticed movement in the shadows. Further down the driveway, behind the fence line, were more figures. 5 or 6 people. Not moving, just standing, watching. All of them had something covering their faces. Hoodies, bandanas. I couldn't see details. A lump formed in my throat. I backed away from the door, turned, and walked fast, quietly, to the hallway, grabbing my phone from the nightstand in the guest bedroom. I ducked into the bathroom and locked the door behind me. I dialed 911 with trembling fingers. 911, what's your emergency? A woman asked. I'm at an Airbnb in Prescott Valley. I gave the address in one breath. There are men outside saying they have a reservation, but there's more of them hiding in the driveway. They're wearing masks. I think they're trying to break in. Okay, ma'am. I need you to stay calm. Are you alone? Yes, I whispered. Stay in a locked room. Officers are on the way. Do not engage. Stay on the line. I sat on the cold tile floor, phone pressed to my ear, heart beating so hard I thought it might echo through the walls. Then I heard it. Movement outside the house. Footsteps, gravel crunching, a car door slamming, then silence. Until it wasn't. The wooden groan of pressure, like weight being forced against the front door. Then, crack. They were inside. I covered my mouth with my hand to muffle the sob that escaped. Ma'am, the dispatcher said, are you okay? They broke in, I whispered. They're in the house. I heard them, running footsteps, cabinet doors slamming open. Someone calling out, check the back. Another voice. Where is she? I curled tighter in the corner of the bathroom, hand still clamped over my mouth. My phone was on mute now. I didn't want to risk them hearing. Footsteps got closer. Hallway, bedroom. Then, a hand on the bathroom door. Locked, a man muttered, then louder. Nothing in here. I sat motionless, breath shallow, staring at the bottom of the door like it might split open. Then, after what felt like an eternity, sirens. Real, distinct, and close. Doors slammed, people shouted, the pounding of feet rushing out the back. Then, quiet again. The knock on the bathroom door this time was followed by a soft voice. Miss? This is Officer Daniels with Prescott Valley PD. Are you okay? I broke down then, fully. Tears I'd been holding in rushed out. They found me minutes later, still on the floor, shaking. What followed felt surreal. The officers confirmed the house had been ransacked. My overnight bag? Gone. My keys? Taken. They shattered my car window and went through the glove box but left the vehicle behind. The Airbnb host showed up an hour later, confused and apologetic. He said the place had been booked only by me and no one else should have had the code. The cops believed the gang likely scouted the area and used Airbnb listings to find unoccupied or solo renter homes. They'd been dealing with similar incidents, they said. Groups using fake accounts or stolen information to trick homeowners or guests. They don't always hurt people, one officer told me. But it's getting riskier. You did the right thing, locking yourself in and staying quiet. I didn't sleep that night, or for several nights after. The next day, I drove straight to Sedona and checked into a hotel instead of the second Airbnb. A place with a front desk, surveillance, security. I haven't used Airbnb since. Even now, months later, I still check behind every door in any place I stay. I still triple-check locks and windows. And sometimes, when the wind hits just right, I swear I hear that doorbell again. Sharp, cold, and wrong. Not all horror stories end in death. Sometimes they just leave you haunted, alive, but never the same. I never thought owning a second house would become the most stressful decision of my adult life. It started out as a smart investment. My wife, Emily, and I had bought the place just outside Asheville, North Carolina, about a 20-minute drive from where we lived. It was a charming 3-bedroom cabin tucked into the trees, just secluded enough to appeal to the kinds of people who wanted to get away from it all, but close enough to downtown to be listed as convenient. We both had full-time jobs. She was a teacher, I worked in IT from home, so the idea of turning the cabin into an Airbnb just seemed like a great side hustle. The market was hot, the place was cute, and we had enough money saved to furnish it with taste. And for the first 2 years, it worked. We barely spoke to our guests beyond a handful of messages, hired a local cleaning lady, and the rental calendar was almost always full. We were making double what a long-term tenant would have paid. Sure, it was more hands-on, but it gave us options. We weren't tied to a year-long lease, and we could block off weekends for ourselves. But success started coming with complications. The kind you don't read about in Airbnb success blogs. The real shift started on a Monday evening in early October. I had just logged off from work, still in my sweats, reheating leftovers. Emily was grading papers in the next room. We had a one-night booking at the cabin, something we usually avoided because it meant rushing to clean and reset for the next guest. But it was midweek, and it had been a slow month. The reservation was under the name Brian Keller. He booked the place for one night only, said he was passing through from Charleston and wanted a quiet evening before driving to Tennessee. His profile looked normal enough. 2 5-star reviews. Verified ID. He messaged politely around noon, saying he'd arrive around 4:30 p.m. I sent him the usual automated welcome message with the smart lock code and the instructions for the fireplace. At 4:52 p.m., I got the standard text. Brian. Hey, just got here. Beautiful place, thanks again. I replied with a thumbs up. No red flags, no gut feelings, just another night. At 9:07 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Brian. Hey, can I call you real quick? My stomach turned a little. Most people didn't call. If anything went wrong, they texted. Messages were easy to manage, easy to forward if needed. But before I could reply, my phone lit up with his number. I sighed, set down my drink, and answered. Hello? Hey, yeah, sorry to bother you, Brian said. His voice was calm, maybe a little too calm. It's just the water. It's not working. I tried the kitchen tap and the bathroom faucet, but nothing's coming out. I blinked. None of the taps, like no pressure at all? Yeah, like bone dry. That didn't make any sense. We'd never had plumbing issues before. I apologized, told him I'd come by to take a quick look. It'd only take me 20 minutes. He agreed without hesitation. No problem at all, he said. Thanks for being on top of it. I threw on jeans and a hoodie, grabbed my flashlight and tool bag just in case. Emily looked up from the kitchen table. You going out there now? She asked. Yeah. Guess says the water's not working. She frowned. That's weird. Yeah, I know. I'll be back soon. Driving to the cabin was usually peaceful. That night, though, the road felt too quiet. Just me, winding down dark mountain turns, headlights bouncing off pine trunks. The air was cold and wet-smelling, early signs of frost. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, the first thing I noticed was the 2 cars. One was a silver Ford sedan, the kind you'd get from a rental lot. The other was an older blue SUV, parked tight along the edge like it didn't belong there. I slowed down. Brian said he was alone. Airbnb's rules clearly said no extra guests without permission. I made a mental note to mention it in the follow-up review. Still, nothing looked off. The porch light was on. No visible damage. I walked up and knocked politely before entering the smart lock code. No answer. "Brian?" I called. "It's me, Matt, the owner. Just coming to check the plumbing." Still nothing. I stepped inside. The house smelled faintly of cedar and cleaning supplies. Normal. The lights were on in the living room. And then I heard footsteps upstairs. I raised my voice. "Hey, sorry to barge in. Just wanted to check out the water issue." Footsteps paused. Then someone started coming down the stairs. A man, probably late 20s, turned the corner. Dark hair, clean-shaven. He wore a long-sleeved black shirt and jeans, calm expression. "You must be Matt," he said, smiling faintly. "Yeah, Brian, right?" He nodded. "Thanks for coming so late. I know it's a pain." "No problem," I said. "So you said the water's not working?" "Yeah," he said, glancing toward the kitchen. "It was weird. Just went off a little after we got settled." I noticed then there was a second mug on the coffee table, a scarf tossed over one of the chairs. "Someone else with you?" I asked casually. Brian gave a vague shrug. "My girlfriend stopped by for dinner. She just left." But the blue SUV was still parked outside. "Got it," I said slowly, walking into the kitchen. I turned the tap. Nothing. No sound. No pressure. Then I flicked the switch for the garbage disposal out of habit. It didn't hum. No power. I looked at him. "Did you check the breaker box?" He looked confused. "The what?" I didn't believe him. "Mind if I check it real quick?" I asked, already walking toward the utility closet near the back hallway. "Sure," he said too quickly. I opened the closet. The panel looked fine, all switches in the right place. I flipped the main switch off and on. Still nothing. That's when I heard a sound from upstairs. Something like a thud. I turned. "You sure you're here alone?" Brian blinked. "Yeah. Why?" I didn't answer. Just started walking up the stairs. He didn't stop me. The upstairs hallway was dimly lit. Only one room had a light on. I stepped closer and saw the door slightly ajar. Inside was the master bedroom. Empty. But the closet door was closed, and I knew I'd left it open after the last cleaning. I took a step closer, heart pounding, then paused. From behind me, Brian called up, "Everything okay?" "Just checking something," I replied. My hand went to the closet knob. I opened it fast. Empty. My heart finally slowed. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe the second car belonged to the girlfriend and she had left on foot or with someone else. Maybe the power outage was a fluke. But then I noticed something in the closet corner. A second set of shoes, women's boots, still warm. I stepped out into the hallway and called down, "Hey, can you come here a sec?" Silence. "Brian?" No reply. I rushed downstairs. The front door was wide open. His car was still in the driveway. But he was gone. So was the SUV. I called Emily immediately. "Lock the doors, don't open for anyone, call the police if anything weird happens." "What's wrong?" she asked, panicked. "I don't know yet," I said, climbing into my truck. "But I think someone just used our Airbnb for something they weren't supposed to." I reported the whole thing to Airbnb the next day, gave them all the messages, the call log, even a screenshot of the guest's profile. Turns out, the profile was fake. The ID had been stolen. The payment bounced 2 days later. The number he used was disconnected. We never found out who they were or what they were doing there. But a week later, the cleaning lady found a knife wedged deep into the mattress of the master bed. Hidden, deliberately. That was the last guest we ever hosted. We sold the cabin 6 months later. And I still checked the lock on our front door 3 times before bed. Just in case. It started as a simple favor. I wasn't even supposed to be in town that weekend. My sister Kayla and her husband Mark had listed their second house on Airbnb a few months earlier. It was a modest 2-bedroom bungalow in a quiet neighborhood just outside Flagstaff, Arizona, the kind of place tourists liked. Cozy, clean, affordable, and just far enough from the city that it felt peaceful. They were in Hawaii on vacation, and I was back home in Phoenix. Around 9 p.m. on a Friday night, Kayla texted me asking if I could do her a quick favor. Kayla, can you drive up to the house tomorrow? The current guests say there's no running water. Me. Seriously? Isn't that a job for a plumber? Kayla. We called someone, but they can't get there until Monday. I just need you to check if the valve was bumped or something dumb, please? I sighed. It wasn't ideal. A 3-hour drive just to check on some piping, but I owed her. She helped me through college and let me crash on her couch for nearly a year after my breakup. I agreed, packed an overnight bag just in case, and planned to leave early the next morning. Backstory, I'd stayed at the house once before, just after they bought it. Nothing weird about the place. Quiet neighborhood, friendly neighbors, fenced-in yard. The street was mostly retirees and the occasional out-of-towner. The water had never been a problem. Kayla was meticulous about keeping things maintained, and Mark installed all new plumbing 6 months earlier. But I couldn't shake a weird feeling during the drive. I kept imagining what kind of person would turn off a water valve on purpose, and why. I got to the house around 12:30 the next afternoon. It was hotter than expected, mid-90s and not a cloud in the sky. As I pulled up the gravel driveway, I noticed something odd. No cars out front. There were supposed to be guests staying there, a couple, maybe in their 20s. Kayla said they booked 2 nights and were supposed to leave Sunday. But the driveway was empty, the curtains drawn, and the place looked almost abandoned. Still, I parked, grabbed the spare key from the lockbox and knocked first, just in case. No answer. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Hello? Anyone here? I called out. Silence. The living room was clean. Not hotel room clean, but lived in. A few mugs in the sink. Someone's duffel bag resting by the hallway door. But no people. Okay, I muttered. This is already weird. The first thing I did was head to the basement to check the water valve. The house had a finished basement with a utility closet in the back corner. As I descended the creaky steps, I noticed how quiet it was. No hum of appliances. No floorboards creaking above me. Just this heavy, muffled silence. I opened the utility door and spotted the valve on the far wall. It was twisted tightly shut. I turned it slowly, and the moment I did, I heard a distant whoosh. Water rushing through the pipes. Weird. Why would someone shut it off like that? As I stood there staring at it, something gnawed at me. Why weren't the guests anywhere to be seen? Why leave the valve completely closed and then complain about no water? Then I remembered Kayla said the guy who booked the place called her directly. He'd told her his name was Ryan. Young, polite, sounded normal. But anyone could say that. Anyone could use a fake name and stolen card. This was an Airbnb after all. I took a deep breath and turned to head back upstairs. That's when the basement door creaked open, followed by footsteps. They were heavy, deliberate, not fast, but sure. I froze halfway up the steps, and then 3 men came into view, all in jeans and hoodies, late 30s, maybe early 40s, bearded. One of them had tattoos creeping up his neck, the kind that weren't for decoration, the kind that said prison time. The lead guy smiled faintly. "Is it fixed?" he asked. I recognized the voice immediately. It was Ryan, the same guy who called my sister, except he wasn't young, and he sure as hell didn't look like a tourist. Yeah, I said cautiously. The valve was just shut off, must have tightened on its own. They all just stared at me. No expression, no nods, no thanks. I cleared my throat. So, I'll head out now. Let me know if you need anything else. As I tried to step past them, I noticed something terrifying, tucked into the waistband of the guy closest to the stairs. A gun. I didn't wait. I forced a polite smile, walked past them, and climbed the rest of the stairs faster than I should have. They didn't follow me, but they watched me. I walked straight out the front door, got into my car, and drove 2 blocks before I even blinked. When I got home, Kayla was frantic. "You're back early. What happened?" I told her everything. From the silent house to the valve to the 3 men in the basement. She went pale and immediately said, "I'm calling the cops." She reported it as a suspected break-in or squatting situation. When the Flagstaff police arrived about 40 minutes later, they called her back. "No one was home," the officer said. "Doors were locked, no signs of forced entry. Place looks clean." Kayla gave them the code to the lockbox. Another hour later, she got another call. "Looks like the place was recently vacated," the officer said. "But here's the kicker. The credit card used for the booking was flagged as stolen this morning." Over the next few days, Kayla and Mark inspected the house. They found several items missing: a $1,200 sound system, a collection of antique vases, some electronics. Even the guest towels were gone. There was no young couple, no Ryan, no real booking. Whoever those men were, they'd used a stolen card to gain access, stayed just long enough to scope the place out, and may have been planning something worse. What haunts me the most is that they turned off the water on purpose, to get me to come. They must have known the owners were out of town. Maybe they looked up Kayla's social media and knew she was in Hawaii. Maybe they wanted to scare me, rob me, or worse. But then, why didn't they? Why let me walk away? That was the last time Kayla ever let someone stay there without meeting them first. A few months later, she pulled the house off Airbnb completely and rented it out long-term instead. Now, every time I pass a basement door, I hesitate. Every time I hear footsteps on stairs, my stomach turns. And every time someone tells me it's probably nothing, I remember the faces of those 3 men and the way they just stood there, waiting.